The Seamstress's Secret. My name is Margaret Chen, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 45 years old, and for the last 20 years, I've been a seamstress working in a small alteration shop in the heart of Manhattan. My life has always been simple, predictable, contained within the four walls of my tiny studio apartment and the cluttered workspace where I spend 12 hours a day mending hems, taking in wastes, and breathing new life into expensive clothes that their wealthy owners have grown bored of or outgrown. I never imagined that one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, while repairing a torn pocket in a vintage suit, I would find something that would shatter everything I thought I knew about myself, my past, and the very foundation of my existence. A single photograph, yellowed with age, would unlock secrets that had been buried for 3 decades. Secrets that powerful people had killed to keep hidden. Secrets that would force me to question every relationship I had ever trusted. And secrets that would ultimately lead me to a truth so devastating that I'm still not sure whether finding it was a blessing or a curse. But before we start this story, have you subscribed to the channel yet? We're on our way to 500 subscribers, and your help is really important for the channel's growth. Hit that subscribe button, activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos, and leave a like if you're enjoying this content. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's dive into this incredible story. I remember that Tuesday like it was yesterday, even though it was 6 months ago. The day started like any other. I woke up at 5 in the morning in my cramped studio apartment in Queens, made myself a cup of instant coffee that tasted like cardboard, and took the subway into Manhattan. The shop where I work, Chen's Alterations, isn't actually mine despite the name. It belongs to my adoptive father, Thomas Chen, who opened it 40 years ago when he first immigrated from Taiwan. He's 80 now, too old to work the long hours anymore, so the business has essentially become mine, even though his name is still on the door and he still takes most of the profits. I don't complain. He and my adoptive mother, Susan, raised me from the age of 2, gave me a home when I had nothing, and for that, I owe them everything. The shop is wedged between a dry cleaner and a nail salon on a busy street in Midtown. We get a steady stream of customers, mostly wealthy professionals who work in the skyscrapers nearby and need their expensive suits and dresses altered quickly. I've become invisible to most of them over the years. They hand me their clothes, tell me what they need, and barely look at me. I'm just the Asian woman with the measuring tape and the pin cushion strapped to her wrist. I'm part of the background of their important lives. That Tuesday, around 2 in the afternoon, the bell above the door chimed, and a man walked in carrying a garment bag. He was tall, probably in his early 60s, with silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I make in 3 months. Everything about him screamed old money and power. His shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. His watch was a Rolex that caught the light every time he moved his wrist. His cologne was expensive and subtle, the kind that whispers wealth rather than shouting it. "I need this repaired," he said, laying the garment bag on my counter. His voice was deep and authoritative, the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "The inside pocket is torn. I need it fixed by Friday. Can you do that?" I unzipped the bag and pulled out a stunning Armani suit, charcoal gray, with the finest wool I'd ever touched. Even at a glance, I could tell it was vintage, probably from the early 90s, impeccably maintained. "Yes, I can have it ready by Friday," I said, examining the torn pocket. It was a clean tear, easy to fix. "Good," he said, pulling out his wallet. "My name is Richard Whitmore. I'll pick it up Friday afternoon." He handed me a business card along with his credit card. The card identified him as the CEO of Whitmore Industries, a name I vaguely recognized from news articles about real estate development and political donations. After he left, I hung the suit on my rack and went back to the dress I'd been hemming. But something about that suit kept pulling my attention. Maybe it was the quality of the fabric, or maybe it was something else, something I couldn't quite name. Around 4 o'clock, when the shop was empty and quiet, I took the suit down and examined the torn pocket more closely. That's when I saw it. Tucked deep inside the torn lining, hidden in a way that suggested it had been there for years, was a photograph. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled it out, careful not to damage it further. It was a Polaroid, the kind people used before digital cameras became ubiquitous, and it had that characteristic faded quality that old Polaroids get, the colors shifting toward yellow and blue, The photo showed a young woman, probably in her early 20s, with long blonde hair and a radiant smile. She was holding a baby, maybe 6 or 7 months old, with a tiny tuft of black hair and chubby cheeks. The baby was laughing, mouth open in pure joy. But it was what I saw on the baby's wrist that made my heart stop. There, clearly visible in the photograph, was a distinctive birthmark, shaped almost like a small butterfly, dark against the pale skin. I have that exact same birthmark, on my left wrist, in the exact same place. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the photograph. I set it down on my work table and pulled up my sleeve, staring at my wrist, at the birthmark I'd had my entire life, the one my adoptive mother always said made me special, unique. Then I looked back at the photo. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. I turned the photo over with trembling fingers. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were 3 things: a date, April 15th, 1994, a set of numbers that looked like coordinates, and 3 words that made my blood run cold. Keep her safe. April 15th, 1994. I was born in March of 1994, according to my adoptive parents. They told me they adopted me when I was 2 years old, in 1996, from a Catholic orphanage in upstate New York. They said my biological parents had abandoned me, that there were no records, no information about where I came from. I'd accepted that story my entire life. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? Thomas and Susan Chen were my parents in every way that mattered. But now, staring at this photograph, questions exploded in my mind like fireworks. Was this me? Was this baby me? Who was the woman holding me? And most importantly, why was this photo hidden in Richard Whitmore's suit pocket? I sat down heavily on my stool, my mind racing. I needed to think clearly, rationally. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Birthmarks aren't unique. Maybe lots of people have butterfly-shaped marks on their left wrist. Maybe I was seeing connections that didn't exist because I'd always wondered about my biological parents, always had that hole in my identity that adopted children often carry. But the date, April 1994, right after I was supposedly born, and those coordinates, and those 3 words, keep her safe. Safe from what? Safe from whom? I looked at the business card Richard Whitmore had left. I could call him, ask him about the photo. But something stopped me. If this photo had been hidden in his suit pocket for potentially decades, there was a reason. If he'd wanted anyone to see it, he wouldn't have hidden it so carefully. And if I revealed that I'd found it, what would happen? Would he take it back? Would he deny everything? Would I lose my only clue to a mystery I didn't even know existed until an hour ago? No. I needed to investigate this myself, quietly, carefully. I needed to find out the truth before confronting anyone. That evening, instead of going straight home like I usually did, I went to a FedEx office store and made several copies of the photograph, front and back. I put the original in an envelope and hid it in my apartment, in a box of old sewing supplies where no one would ever think to look. Then I took one of the copies and went to the public library. The coordinates on the back of the photo led to a location in upstate New York, near a small town called Millbrook. I'd never been there, never even heard of it. Using the library computers, I searched for any news articles from April 1994 involving Millbrook, any accidents, any deaths, anything that might give me a clue. What I found made my hands start shaking again. On April 16, 1994, just one day after the date on the photograph, there had been a car accident on a rural road outside Millbrook. A single vehicle collision. The driver, a 23-year-old woman named Jennifer Morrison, had died at the scene. The article said she'd lost control of her car on a rainy night and crashed into a tree. There were no other passengers. The funeral was private. She was survived by her parents, who declined to comment to the press. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I pulled up the photocopy and looked at the young blonde woman holding the baby. Could this be Jennifer Morrison? The timeline matched. The location matched. But if she died in that accident, what happened to the baby? What happened to me if that baby was really me? I searched for more information about Jennifer Morrison. There wasn't much. She'd been a student at a local college. She'd worked part-time at a bookstore. She'd been engaged, according to one article, though it didn't name her fiancé. After her death, she seemed to vanish from public record completely, as if she'd never existed. But there was one more thing. In a small article about the accident, buried at the bottom, was a quote from the local sheriff. He said the accident was unfortunate but not suspicious, that Miss Morrison had been driving alone on a dangerous road in poor weather conditions, and that her death was a tragic reminder to drive carefully. But then he added something odd. He said there had been some confusion at the scene because the car had been registered to someone else, but that it had been cleared up quickly. Registered to someone else. Who? I tried to find follow-up articles, but there were none. The story had died with Jennifer Morrison. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. I repaired Richard Whitmore's suit, carefully putting the lining back together as if nothing had ever been hidden there. On Friday, he came to pick it up, and I watched him carefully, looking for any resemblance, any sign that he might be related to me. He was tall. I'm short. He had blue eyes. Mine are brown. He didn't look at me as anything more than the invisible seamstress who'd fixed his pocket. "Perfect," he said, examining my work. "How much do I owe you?" $85, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He handed me his credit card without a word, signed the receipt, and left. I stood there holding his signature, staring at the bold, confident letters of his name. Richard Whitmore. Was this man connected to me? Was he the person who had registered that car? Was he the reason Jennifer Morrison was dead? I knew I was jumping to conclusions. I knew I was letting my imagination run wild, but I couldn't stop. It was like a thread had been pulled, and now my entire life was unraveling, revealing a pattern I'd never seen before. That weekend, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to the shop, telling my father I had the flu, and I rented a car. Then I drove 3 hours upstate to Millbrook. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed to see the place where Jennifer Morrison died. Maybe I needed to make it real. The coordinates from the photograph led me to a large estate on the outskirts of town, surrounded by stone walls and iron gates. Through the gates, I could see a massive house, the kind that appeared in magazines about how the wealthy live. The mailbox at the gate said, "Whitmore." My heart nearly stopped. Richard Whitmore owned this estate. The photo had been hidden in his suit. Jennifer Morrison had died nearby. And the baby in the photo, the baby with my birthmark, had been connected to all of this somehow. I sat in my rental car down the road from the estate for hours, trying to decide what to do. Finally, as the sun was setting, I drove into town and checked into a small motel. I couldn't go home yet. I needed answers. The next morning, I went to the Millbrook Public Library. Small towns keep records, and librarians know everything. I found an older woman at the reference desk, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. "Excuse me," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm doing some genealogy research, and I'm trying to find information about someone who lived here in the 90s. Jennifer Morrison?" The librarian's expression changed immediately. Her friendly smile faltered, and something that looked like sadness crossed her face. "Jennifer Morrison," she repeated quietly. "Now that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Your family?" "Distant cousin," I lied. "I never got to meet her. She died before I was born, but my family doesn't talk about her much. I'm trying to piece together what happened." The librarian studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling she could see right through my lie. But then she nodded slowly. "It was a tragedy. Jennifer was such a sweet girl. Worked here at the library, actually, shelving books while she was in college. Then she got involved with that Whitmore boy, and everything went wrong." My pulse quickened. "Whitmore boy?" "Richard Whitmore, Jr.," she said, lowering her voice even though we were alone. "His family owns half this town. Old money, you know. Real estate, investments, all that. Richard was engaged to some socialite his parents had picked out, some girl from another wealthy family. But then he met Jennifer, and they fell hard for each other. It was a scandal. The Whitmores didn't approve, of course. Wrong social class, wrong background. But Jennifer and Richard didn't care. They were going to run away together, or so the story went. "And then she died," I said. "And then she died," the librarian echoed, her expression dark. "Car accident," they said. "But there were rumors. People talked. This is a small town. People always talk." "What kind of rumors?" She glanced around, as if worried someone might be listening, even though the library was empty. "Rumors that it wasn't an accident. Rumors that the Whitmores had something to do with it. Richard Sr., Richard's father, was a powerful man. Still is, though he's got to be 90 by now. People said he wouldn't let his son marry some girl from nowhere, that he'd do whatever it took to protect the family name and the family fortune." My mouth went dry. "Do you think the rumors were true?" She shrugged. I don't know. The sheriff at the time was practically on the Whitmore payroll. The investigation was closed quickly. Jennifer was buried, and that was that. Richard Jr. married the socialite like his parents wanted, some woman named Catherine from a banking family in New York. They had 2 children. He took over the family business eventually. Life went on for the Whitmores, but Jennifer stayed in the ground. Did Jennifer have any family? Anyone who might have questioned the official story? Her parents, the librarian said sadly. But they were simple people, working class. They didn't have the money or the power to fight the Whitmores, and they were grieving. They just wanted to bury their daughter and move on. They moved away about a year after Jennifer died. I heard they went to Florida, but I'm not sure. They wanted to get away from the memories, I suppose. I thanked the librarian and left, my mind spinning. So Richard Whitmore, the man who'd walked into my shop, the CEO with the expensive suit and the Rolex watch, had been in love with Jennifer Morrison. They'd been planning to run away together. Then she died in a suspicious accident, and 9 months later, based on the baby's age in the photo, I would have been born. Or the baby in the photo would have been born. Was Jennifer pregnant when she died? Was that why the Whitmores wanted her gone? Was I that baby, somehow survived and hidden away? But the articles said she'd been alone in the car. There was no mention of a baby. I drove back to the location of the accident. The librarian had mentioned it was on Old Creek Road, about 5 miles outside town. I found the spot easily enough. There was still a scar on the tree where the car had hit 30 years ago. The bark grown around the wound but still visible if you knew where to look. I stood there on the side of that quiet road, trying to imagine what had happened that night. A young woman, possibly pregnant, running away from powerful people who wanted to control her life. Had she really lost control of the car? Or had someone forced her off the road? And if she was pregnant, where was the baby now? Where was I now? I spent the rest of the day in Millbrook, visiting the cemetery where Jennifer Morrison was buried. Her grave was simple, just her name and dates. Jennifer Morrison, 1971-1994. No loving daughter, no beloved fiancé, no mention of a child. Just a name and 2 dates that bookended a life cut tragically short. I stood at her grave for a long time, wondering if this woman was my mother, wondering if she'd loved me, if she'd wanted me, if she'd died trying to protect me. The photo said, "Keep her safe." Had Jennifer written that? Had she known she was in danger? Had she hidden that photo somewhere, hoping someone would find it someday and know the truth? When I got back to New York late Sunday night, I was exhausted but determined. I needed more information, and I knew where to start. I needed to find out everything I could about Richard Whitmore and his family. Monday morning, instead of going straight to the shop, I went to the New York Public Library and spent hours in the periodicals section, going through old newspapers and magazines, building a picture of the Whitmore family. Richard Whitmore Sr., the patriarch, had built a real estate empire in the 70s and 80s. He'd been ruthless in business, according to several articles, crushing competitors and buying up properties all over New York and the surrounding states. He'd been investigated multiple times for fraud and corruption, but nothing ever stuck. He had too many connections, too many politicians in his pocket. His son, Richard Jr., the man who'd come into my shop, had taken over the business in the early 2000s when his father semi-retired. Richard Jr. had a reputation for being slightly more ethical than his father, but that wasn't saying much. He'd expanded the empire into international markets, made billions, and maintained the family's place among New York's elite. Richard Jr. had married Catherine Ashford in 1995, just a year after Jennifer Morrison's death. They had 2 children, Victoria, now 28 and working as a lawyer at a prestigious Manhattan firm, and James, 26, and being groomed to take over Whitmore Industries eventually. The family lived in a penthouse on the Upper East Side and maintained several other properties, including the estate in Millbrook. They were photographed at charity galas, political fundraisers, and exclusive social events. They were the picture of American aristocracy, old money, and older power. And somewhere in this perfect family portrait, I might be a ghost, an inconvenient truth that had been erased. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed. I couldn't stop digging, couldn't stop searching for proof. I hired a private investigator, spending money I didn't have, to find Jennifer Morrison's parents. He tracked them down in Tampa, Florida. They were both still alive, in their 70s now, living in a modest retirement community. I called them. I don't know what I expected. I don't know what I thought they would tell me, but I had to try. Jennifer's mother, Patricia Morrison, answered the phone. Her voice was thin and tired, the voice of someone who'd lived through things she'd rather forget. "Mrs. Morrison," I said, my voice shaking. "My name is Margaret Chen. I'm calling because I'm trying to learn about your daughter, Jennifer." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Why? Who are you? Why are you asking about Jennifer?" I took a deep breath. "I think I might be her daughter." The silence that followed was so long and heavy that I thought she might have hung up, but then I heard her crying, soft sobs that she was trying to muffle. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Oh, my God. After all these years, we thought you were dead. They told us you were dead." My whole body went cold. "What? Who told you I was dead?" "The Whitmores," Patricia Morrison said, her voice breaking. "After the accident, they told us Jennifer had been pregnant, that you'd been born premature and died a few days later. They wouldn't let us see the baby. They said it was too painful, that we should just try to move on. We had a funeral for you along with Jennifer. We buried an empty casket, and we've mourned both of you for 30 years. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. Everything. But I'm alive, I managed to say. I'm here. I was adopted by a family in New York when I was 2. I have the birthmark Jennifer had. I found a photo of her holding a baby with the same birthmark. I think that baby was me." Patricia Morrison was crying openly now. "They lied. They took you from us. They told us you were dead, and they took you. Oh, God," Jennifer tried to tell us. "Before she died, she called us, terrified, saying the Whitmores were threatening her, that they wanted her gone, that she was going to hide you somewhere safe. We thought she was being paranoid because of the pregnancy hormones. We told her to calm down, to come home. And then she was dead, and you were supposedly dead, and we believed them. We believed their lies." "Mrs. Morrison," I said, tears streaming down my face now too. "Do you have any proof? Any documents? Anything that proves Jennifer was pregnant? That I existed?" "We have letters," she said. "Jennifer wrote us letters. She didn't mail them. The police gave them to us after the accident. They were found in her apartment. She wrote about being pregnant, about being in love with Richard Whitmore, about being terrified of his family. She wrote about wanting to name her baby Margaret if it was a girl. She wrote about how she was going to protect you no matter what. We have those letters. We've kept everything." "Margaret, my name. Jennifer had wanted to name me Margaret. I need to see those letters," I said. "I need proof." "Come to Florida," Patricia Morrison said immediately. "Come see us. We'll give you everything we have. We want to meet you. We want to meet our granddaughter. Please." I booked a flight for that weekend. I was terrified, excited, confused, angry, and 1,000 other emotions I couldn't even name. But I had to go. I had to know the complete truth. My adoptive parents, Thomas and Susan Chen, knew nothing about any of this. I hadn't told them what I'd discovered. How could I? How could I tell them that the adoption they'd arranged 30 years ago might have been illegal, that I might have been stolen from my real family, that they might have been part of a conspiracy, even unknowingly? I loved them. They'd raised me, fed me, supported me, but I needed to know the truth first before I confronted them. That Friday, I flew to Tampa. Patricia and Robert Morrison picked me up at the airport. They were small, ordinary-looking people, dressed simply, driving an old sedan. But when Patricia saw me walking out of the terminal, she let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and ran toward me. She grabbed my hands and stared at my face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You look just like her," she whispered. "Just like our Jennifer. Oh my God, you're real. You're alive." Robert Morrison was crying too, standing behind his wife, one hand on her shoulder. "We thought we'd lost everything," he said hoarsely. "We thought we'd lost our daughter and our grandchild. But here you are. Here you are." They took me to their small apartment in the retirement community. It was neat and modest, filled with photos of Jennifer at various ages, baby pictures, school pictures, graduation photos, and in every photo I could see the resemblance, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the way her hair fell. This was my mother. This was really my mother. Patricia brought out a box she'd kept hidden in her closet for 30 years. Inside were Jennifer's letters, her diary, photos, and documents. We spent hours going through everything. Jennifer's words, written in her own hand, told the whole story. She'd met Richard Whitmore at a bookstore where she worked. He'd come in to buy a gift, and they'd started talking. He'd come back the next day and the next, and soon they were in love. Jennifer knew his family would never approve. Richard was engaged to Catherine Ashford, and the wedding was already planned. But Richard told Jennifer he didn't love Catherine, that his parents had arranged the marriage, that he wanted to be with Jennifer instead. When Jennifer discovered she was pregnant, Richard was terrified. He wanted to tell his family, to call off the engagement, to marry Jennifer. But when he did tell them, everything exploded. Richard Sr. threatened him, told him he'd be disinherited if he didn't marry Catherine. He told Richard that Jennifer was a gold digger, that she'd probably gotten pregnant on purpose to trap him. Jennifer's letters described meetings with Richard Sr., meetings where he'd offered her money to get an abortion, to disappear, to never contact Richard again. She'd refused. She'd loved Richard, and she'd loved me, the baby growing inside her. She'd believed that love would be enough. But then the threats got worse. People started following her. Her car was vandalized. Someone broke into her apartment. She was terrified. In her last letters, written just days before she died, she wrote that she was going to hide me somewhere safe, that she'd made arrangements with a friend to take me if anything happened to her. "Do you know who the friend was?" I asked Patricia. She shook her head. "We never knew. The police found these letters after Jennifer died, but they didn't investigate. They said it was just the paranoid writings of a pregnant, emotional girl. They said the accident was just an accident. We were too grief-stricken to fight them. And when the Whitmores told us you'd died too, we just fell apart. We should have fought. We should have demanded answers. But we were broken, and they were powerful. And we didn't know how to fight people like that." I stayed in Tampa for 3 days, learning everything about Jennifer, about the family I'd never known I had. The Morrisons gave me copies of everything, told me they wanted to be part of my life if I'd let them. They were my grandparents. They'd lost 30 years with me, but they wanted whatever time was left. When I flew back to New York, I was a different person than the one who'd left. I knew who I was now. I knew where I came from. But I also knew that this knowledge came with a terrible burden. I now knew that my entire existence was based on lies, that I'd been stolen from my family, that my mother had likely been murdered, and that the man responsible was walking around free, living in luxury, completely untouched by the evil he'd done. Richard Whitmore Sr. had killed my mother, or had her killed. He'd taken me and hidden me, told my grandparents I was dead, and lived with that secret for 30 years. And his son, Richard Jr., who'd supposedly loved my mother, had gone along with it. He'd married Catherine as planned. He'd had children. He'd taken over the family business. He'd moved on as if Jennifer and I had never existed. I had to decide what to do with this information. I could go to the police, but what proof did I have? Letters from 30 years ago, written by a dead woman? A photograph hidden in a suit pocket? The word of grieving grandparents? It would be their word against the Whitmores, and the Whitmores had unlimited money and lawyers and connections. I could go public, sell my story to the media, but who would believe me? I'd look like someone trying to extort money from a wealthy family. They'd destroy me. Or I could confront them directly. I could walk into Richard Whitmore Jr.'s office and tell him I know what his family did, that I'm Jennifer Morrison's daughter, that I'm alive despite their best efforts to erase me. But what would that accomplish? Would he even care? Would he feel guilt? Or would he see me as a threat to be eliminated, just like his father had seen my mother? I struggled with these questions for weeks. I went back to work at the shop, going through the motions, but I was haunted. I saw Richard Whitmore's face everywhere. I imagined confrontations. I planned speeches. I dreamed of justice. And then something happened that made my decision for me. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, a woman walked in. She was about my age, elegantly dressed, with dark hair and sharp eyes. She looked around the shop with an expression that suggested she didn't usually frequent places like this. "Are you Margaret Chen?" she asked. "Yes," I said warily. "Can I help you?" "My name is Victoria Whitmore," she said. My blood turned to ice. Richard Jr.'s daughter. My half-sister, technically, though she didn't know it. "I need your help," she continued. "My father had a suit repaired here a few months ago. I'm looking for something that might have been in the pocket. A photograph. It's very important to my family." So they knew. They knew I'd found the photo. But how? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Victoria's expression hardened. "Don't play games with me. My father realized the photo was missing. He traced it back to your shop. We know you found it. We want it back. And if I don't have it, then we have a problem," Victoria said coldly. That photograph is private family property. If you've made copies, if you've shown it to anyone, if you're planning to do anything with it, I suggest you reconsider. My family has resources you can't imagine. We can make your life very difficult. It was a threat, a clear, unmistakable threat. And in that moment, looking at this privileged woman who'd grown up with everything while I'd grown up with nothing, while my mother lay dead in the ground, I made my decision. Get out of my shop, I said quietly. Excuse me? I said get out, and you can tell your father and your grandfather that Margaret Morrison says hello. Victoria's face went white. What did you just say? You heard me. Margaret Morrison, Jennifer Morrison's daughter. The baby your family told everyone was dead. But I'm not dead. I'm alive, and I know everything. For a moment, Victoria just stared at me, and I could see her mind racing, processing, calculating. Then her expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. Fear? Curiosity? Calculation? You need to come with me, she said finally. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't understand. If what you're saying is true, if you really are who you say you are, then you're in danger. My grandfather is still alive. He's 90 years old, but he still controls everything. If he finds out you exist, that you know the truth, he'll have you killed, just like he killed your mother. I stared at her, trying to determine if this was another threat or a genuine warning. Why would you warn me? I asked. I'm a threat to your family, to your inheritance. Because, Victoria said, and now there was something raw in her voice, something real. I've spent my entire life watching my family destroy people. I've watched my grandfather manipulate and control everyone around him. I've watched my father become a shell of a person, trapped in a life he never wanted. And I've always wondered what happened to the woman whose picture my father kept hidden in his desk drawer, the woman whose name he whispers in his sleep sometimes. Jennifer. Now I know. And if you're really her daughter, then you deserve to know everything. But you need to be smart about this. You need to be careful. Could I trust her? Could I trust anyone in this family? But what choice did I have? Tell me everything, I said. Victoria looked around the shop nervously, then back at me. Not here. My grandfather has people everywhere. If he finds out I'm talking to you, we're both dead. Meet me tomorrow night. There's a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan, far from anywhere my family would go. Russo's Cafe on Smith Street, 9 o'clock. Come alone. She handed me a card with the address written on it, and then she was gone, disappearing into the Manhattan evening like a ghost. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was walking into a trap, but I had to know. I had to hear what Victoria had to say. The next night, I took the subway to Brooklyn and found Russo's Cafe, a small Italian place tucked between a laundromat and a bodega. Victoria was already there, sitting in a back corner booth, wearing jeans and a plain jacket, looking nothing like the polished lawyer I'd seen in my shop. She'd dressed down, trying to be invisible. I slid into the booth across from her. I'm here. Now talk. Victoria ordered us both coffee, waited until the waitress left, then leaned forward. What I'm about to tell you could destroy my entire family, but you deserve to know the truth. And honestly, I'm tired of carrying these secrets. I'm listening. She took a deep breath. My father loved your mother, really loved her. It wasn't just some fling. He was willing to give up everything for her. But my grandfather wouldn't allow it. Richard Whitmore Sr. built his empire on control, on image, on maintaining power. Having his son marry into another powerful family was crucial to his plans. Jennifer Morrison, a bookstore clerk from nowhere, didn't fit into those plans. So he killed her, I said flatly. Not directly, Victoria said. My grandfather never gets his hands dirty. But yes, he arranged it. He hired people. They tampered with Jennifer's car, made it so the brakes would fail on that rainy night on that dangerous road. They made it look like an accident, and it worked. The sheriff was paid off. The investigation was closed. Jennifer was buried. And me? I asked, my voice shaking. What about the baby? What about me? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. That's the part my father couldn't live with. When they found Jennifer after the accident, she was still alive. Barely, but alive. And you were alive too. She'd given birth prematurely in the car, probably from the trauma of the crash. The people my grandfather hired, they took you. They were supposed to kill you too, make it look like you died in the accident. But my father found out. He tracked them down that night, fought them, paid them double to let you live. He saved you. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Richard saved me? He did, Victoria said. But he couldn't keep you. My grandfather would have known. My grandfather would have finished the job. So my father found a family, a good family, who just lost their own baby to illness. Thomas and Susan Chen. Their infant daughter had died of pneumonia just weeks before. They were devastated. My father arranged for them to adopt you through a private adoption. Illegal, yes, but it saved your life. He gave you to people who would love you and protect you, people far away from the Whitmore influence. My mind was reeling. Thomas and Susan Chen had lost a baby? They'd never told me that, but suddenly things made sense. The way my mother sometimes looked at me with such intense love, mixed with sadness. The way my father sometimes seemed to be mourning even while he held me. The photo, I said. The one in the suit pocket. How did Richard have it? Jennifer gave it to him, Victoria said. Before she died, in those last moments in the car, she gave him that photo and made him promise to keep you safe. He's kept that photo hidden for 30 years, along with letters from Jennifer, a lock of her hair, and your hospital bracelet from when you were born. He keeps them all in a safe in his study. Sometimes I see him looking at them when he thinks no one is watching. He's lived in hell for 30 years, married to a woman he doesn't love, working for a company built on blood money, knowing he could have prevented Jennifer's death if he'd just been stronger, if he'd stood up to his father. He should have, I said bitterly. He should have protected her. I know, Victoria said quietly. He knows. It's destroyed him. He's not a bad man, Margaret. He's a weak man. There's a difference. And he's paid for his weakness every day for 30 years. And your grandfather? Richard Sr.? Has he paid? Victoria's expression darkened. He doesn't feel guilt. He doesn't feel remorse. He sees what he did as necessary, as protecting the family legacy. He's a monster. But he's a dying monster. He has cancer. The doctors give him maybe 6 months. And that's why I'm here, why I'm telling you this now. Because when he dies, the truth can finally come out. The people he's paid off, the people he's threatened, they'll have no reason to stay quiet anymore. I want justice, I said. I want the world to know what he did. And you'll have it, Victoria said. But you need to be smart. My grandfather still has power. If you go public now, if you go to the police now, he'll crush you. He'll make you look like a con artist. He'll bury you in legal proceedings. You'll never win. But if you wait, if you gather evidence, if you prepare, when he dies, we can expose everything. I'll help you. I have access to files, to documents, to recordings. My grandfather has kept records of everything, insurance against the people he's worked with. We can use that against him posthumously. Why would you help me? I asked. This will destroy your family's reputation. You'll lose everything. Victoria smiled sadly. I'll lose money. I'll lose social standing. But I'll gain my soul back. I've been complicit in this for too long, benefiting from blood money, living in luxury built on other people's suffering. My brother James, he's just like grandfather. He'll fight you. He'll try to protect the empire. But I'm done. I want out. And helping you is how I get out. We talked for 3 more hours that night. Victoria laid out a plan. We would wait for her grandfather to die. During that time, she would secretly copy documents, gather evidence, build an airtight case. When Richard Sr. died, we would go public with everything. We would hold a press conference. We would go to the district attorney with evidence of murder, conspiracy, corruption, decades of crimes. It wouldn't bring my mother back. It wouldn't give me back the 30 years I'd lost with my real family. But it would be justice. It would be truth. And it would free Richard Jr. from the prison he'd been living in. Over the next 4 months, I lived a double life. During the day, I worked at the shop, smiled at customers, hemmed pants, and took in jackets. At night, I met secretly with Victoria, with my grandparents who flew up from Florida, with lawyers who worked pro bono on cases against powerful families. We built our case carefully, methodically. I also confronted my adoptive parents. That was one of the hardest conversations of my life. I showed them the photo, told them everything I'd learned. Thomas Chen broke down crying, telling me they'd been approached by a lawyer 30 years ago, right after their baby daughter died. They'd been offered a private adoption, told that a baby needed a home urgently, that it was all legal even though it was fast. They were so destroyed by grief, so desperate to fill the hole their daughter's death had left, that they didn't ask questions. They took me. They loved me. They raised me as their own. "We should have questioned it," Susan Chen said, tears streaming down her face. "We should have asked more questions. But we were so broken, and you were so perfect, and we just wanted to be parents again." I forgave them. How could I not? They'd given me a good life. They'd loved me unconditionally. They'd been victims in this too, used by the Whitmores to hide their crimes. Richard Whitmore Sr. died on a cold January morning, surrounded by his family in his penthouse, with round-the-clock nurses and the best medical care money could buy. He died peacefully in his sleep, which seemed profoundly unjust for a man who'd caused so much pain. 3 days after his funeral, we held our press conference. Victoria and I stood together in front of a room full of reporters. I told my story. I showed the photo. I presented the documents Victoria had gathered, letters from Jennifer, records of payoffs to the sheriff, testimony from the men Richard Sr. had hired to tamper with Jennifer's car, men who were now willing to talk because the man who'd threatened them was dead, bank records showing money transfers, everything. The story exploded. It was on every news channel, every website, every newspaper. The Whitmore family, one of New York's most respected dynasties, built on murder and corruption. A young woman killed because she didn't fit into their plans. A baby stolen and hidden. 30 years of lies. Richard Whitmore Jr. held his own press conference 2 days later. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. He confessed everything. He told the world about his love for Jennifer, about his father's threats, about his weakness and cowardice. He told them how he'd saved me but hadn't been strong enough to save Jennifer. He resigned from Whitmore Industries. He filed for divorce from Catherine. He liquidated his personal assets and set up a foundation in Jennifer Morrison's name to help single mothers and children in need. "I can't undo what was done," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't bring Jennifer back. I can't give Margaret back the childhood she should have had. But I can spend whatever time I have left trying to do some good in the world. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I have." The legal proceedings took months. The district attorney reopened the investigation into Jennifer's death. The men who'd tampered with her car were arrested and charged. The former sheriff, now in his 70s and living in Florida, was charged as an accessory after the fact. James Whitmore fought to protect the family business, hired expensive lawyers, tried to spin the narrative. But the evidence was too strong. The truth was too clear. I met with Richard Jr. once, privately, in a small room in his lawyer's office. It was awkward and painful and necessary. "I don't know what to call you," I said. "Father seems wrong. We're strangers." "We are strangers," he agreed. "And that's my fault. That's my sin. I saved your life, but I abandoned you. I let you grow up not knowing who you were. I let Jennifer's memory be buried. I was a coward." "You were," I said, "but you were also the reason I'm alive. Victoria told me you fought for me that night. You saved me when your father wanted me dead. It doesn't make up for everything else I didn't do." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. But it's something." We sat in silence for a while. Then Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "These are letters," he said. "Letters I wrote to you over the years. I never sent them. I didn't have the right, but I wrote them anyway, on your birthdays, on Christmas, whenever I thought about you, which was every day. I want you to have them. You don't have to read them. You can burn them if you want, but they're yours." I took the envelope. "What will you do now?" "Try to be better," he said simply. "Try to do some good. Try to deserve the second chance I don't really deserve, and hope that someday, maybe, you might be able to forgive me. Not now. I don't expect it now, but someday." I didn't forgive him that day. I wasn't ready, but I didn't hate him either. He was a complicated man who'd made terrible choices, but who'd also saved my life. He was my biological father, but he wasn't my dad. Thomas Chen was my dad. Richard was something else, something I didn't have a word for yet. My relationship with Victoria grew into something real. She became the sister I'd never had, the connection to the Whitmore side of my identity that I could actually stomach. She left the law firm, started working at a nonprofit, began building a life based on her own values rather than her family's expectations. My grandparents, Patricia and Robert Morrison, moved back to New York to be near me. We had Sunday dinners together. They told me stories about Jennifer, showed me photos, helped me understand the mother I'd never known. They were in their 70s, not as many years left as I would have liked, but we were making the most of the time we had. The Chens remained my parents in every way that mattered. They supported me through everything, stood by me during the media storm, loved me unconditionally. Susan Chen and Patricia Morrison even became friends, united in their love for me, both of them grandmothers in their own way. 6 months after the press conference, on what would have been Jennifer Morrison's 50th birthday, we held a memorial service for her. Not the small, private funeral the Whitmores had arranged 30 years ago, but a real celebration of her life. Friends from college came. Her old co-workers from the bookstore and the library came. People who'd known her and loved her and remembered her came. I spoke at the service. I told everyone about the mother I'd never gotten to meet, but who'd loved me enough to protect me with her last breath. I told them about the photo she'd left, about the words, "Keep her safe," that had guided me to the truth. I told them that because of her love, because of her sacrifice, I was here, I was alive, and I would make sure her memory lived on. Richard Jr. came to the service. He stood in the back, tears streaming down his face, but he didn't approach me. He was there to honor Jennifer, not to seek forgiveness. That was enough. As I stood at Jennifer's grave after the service, looking at the headstone that now read, "Jennifer Morrison, beloved daughter and mother, her love lives on," I thought about how one photograph hidden in a suit pocket had unraveled 30 years of lies. I thought about how a simple repair job had led me to the truth about who I was and where I came from. My life would never be simple again. I carried the weight of knowing how I'd come into the world, the violence and tragedy that surrounded my birth. But I also carried the love of 2 families, the strength of a mother who died protecting me, and the truth that had finally, after 30 years, come to light. I was Margaret Chen, adopted daughter of Thomas and Susan Chen. I was Margaret Morrison, biological daughter of Jennifer Morrison and Richard Whitmore Jr. I was a seamstress who'd found a photograph and uncovered a conspiracy. I was a granddaughter, a sister, a survivor, and I was finally, after 45 years of not knowing myself. The shop where I worked, Chen's Alterations, still exists. I still mend hems and take in waists and repair torn pockets. But now, when I work on each piece of clothing, I'm reminded that we never know what secrets are hidden in the pockets of the lives we touch. We never know what truths are waiting to be discovered. We never know when one small thread, when pulled, will unravel an entire tapestry of lies and reveal the pattern of truth underneath. That photograph changed everything. It gave me back my history. It gave me justice for my mother. It exposed the corruption of the Whitmores, and it taught me that the truth, no matter how long it's buried, has a way of surfacing when the time is right. I keep that photograph now in a frame on my dresser. Jennifer holding me, both of us smiling, frozen in a moment of pure love before everything went wrong. Next to it, I keep a recent photo of me with my grandparents, the Morrisons and the Chens, all of us together, proof that family isn't just about blood or about who raises you. It's about love. It's about the connections we choose to honor and maintain. Sometimes I take out the letters Richard wrote to me over the years, the ones he never sent. I've read them all now. They're filled with regret, with love he didn't earn the right to express, with hopes for a daughter he'd never know. They don't absolve him. They don't erase his cowardice, but they're human. They're real, and they're part of my story too. Victoria and I have lunch once a week. We're building something new, a relationship based not on the sins of our family, but on who we choose to be. She's dating a teacher now, someone far removed from the world of wealth and power she grew up in. She's happy in a way I don't think she ever was before. The Whitmore empire crumbled. James tried to hold it together, but the scandal was too much. Investors pulled out. Partners ended contracts. The company was sold off in pieces. The Whitmore name, once synonymous with power and prestige, became synonymous with corruption and murder. It's a fitting legacy for Richard Sr., the man who valued image and control above all else, to have his name become mud. As for me, I'm still learning how to carry all these pieces of my identity. Some days it feels like too much. Some days I wish I'd never found that photograph, never opened that door, never learned the truth. Ignorance, they say, is bliss, and there's some truth to that. But most days, I'm grateful. Grateful to know where I come from. Grateful to have found my grandparents. Grateful to understand my mother's sacrifice. Grateful that the truth came out, that justice was served, even if it came 30 years too late. I am a seamstress, I repair what is broken. I mend what is torn. And in finding that photograph, in pulling that thread, I repaired something broken in myself. I mended a tear in my identity that I didn't even know existed. This is my story. This is the truth that was hidden for 30 years in a suit pocket. This is what happens when one woman refuses to let the past stay buried, when she demands answers, when she fights for justice against people more powerful than her. And if you're listening to this story, if it's resonating with you in some way, remember this: the truth matters. Your history matters. Who you are and where you come from matters. Don't let anyone take that from you. Don't let anyone bury your story. And if you find a thread that doesn't quite fit, pull it. See where it leads. Because sometimes the truth we're afraid to uncover is exactly the truth we need to be free.